Hey everybody, Aaron Cowan, Sage Dynamics, and in this week's video we're going to be talking about support hand only shooting skills. Now, when it comes to the handgun, people don't tend to be as ambidextrous as they should be. And you know, I've talked about it in other videos. If you've been to a Sage class, you know this is something I preach. You should be an ambidextrous shooter with pistol and rifle. And this is one of those situations, although it's unlikely, it is possible, it's probable, it has happened to people in the past. If for any reason your primary hand, your natural born hand tendency is disabled, say I get shot in my hand, or I'm defending against a knife, I get stabbed in the hand or something like that, I may have to use my support hand to draw my weapon and fight with it. Now, I am left-hand dominant when it comes to handguns. I'm right-hand dominant when it comes to rifles. I had to train myself across the board so I'd be ambidextrous on both. The good thing for you guys as the viewers for that is most of you are going to be right-handed, so I'm teaching you as a left-handed shooter how to use your left hand. And that's great because I have already overcome all the problems that left-handed shooters have on the firearm. Guns are usually not designed with left-handed shooters in mind. There are some ambidextrous guns out there, but the most common gun that I see is the Glock. The Glock is not designed for left-handed shooters. So what we're going to do in this video is go over some of the draw techniques you can use, reloading techniques, and how to fight with your support hand. Alright, so for the right-handed shooter, let's say my right hand is wounded, injured, I use it to defend myself against an attack, and maybe got shot, maybe something happened. For whatever reason, I either can't use my hand or I can't use my whole arm. Worst case scenario, I won't be able to use my whole arm. It's just not working. I got to draw the gun with my support hand. In this case would be my left hand. How do I do it? Well, in this situation, I'm carrying outside the waistband on the hip. If you're flexible enough, and there are some people out there that can do this, they can reach around behind their body and access the gun in that way. I can probably do it right now, but I'm not going to because it's a serious stretch. So in this situation, all I'm going to do is clear the garment. I'm going to draw the weapon, bring it to my chest, rotate it against my chest, and then the gun's in the fight. Is there another or a faster way to do it coming out of the holster? If I come out of the holster and just kind of do this, that's great. That's faster. However, it does increase the likelihood that we may drop the gun, especially if you don't spend a lot of time working with your support hand. So my advice in this kind of situation is either draw and roll on the chest, or draw between the knees, switch the hand. I don't like the between the knees, I'll be honest with you, because it definitely locks you into a place and time for a short period of time. I'm stuck right here until I repurchase the gun. Because if I try to move, gun drops. Ideally in this situation, you are going to be moving as you're drawing, getting to cover or concealment or whatever's available to you. But from a hip carry condition, it's clear, up, roll, into the fight. So, as you can see, there's no fast way to do that. The draw is going to be slow. You can do it quickly, but obviously it's never going to be as fast as it would be with your primary hand from your primary side, your strong side, your whatever you want to call it. It's a worst case scenario situation, but it's definitely something we should practice to a degree of proficiency, and when you start doing this, it will promote you shooting with your support hand, which you should be doing anyway. But if you're not doing it, this is one of those techniques that'll kind of underscore the importance of being able to be support hand proficient. Now, another popular carry position is the appendix position. It does have some drawbacks, however, when it comes to being accessible to either hand, appendix is actually really good. I got it right here. Again, my primary hand, my right hand is wounded, disabled, whatever. I got to be able to draw the gun. From appendix, it's midline of the body. It's a much easier movement. Same procedure. I'm going to roll it in my hand, bring it into the fight. Is there a faster way to do it? Not really. Not with maintaining constant contact on the weapon. I clear the garment, I grab the gun, I bring it up to the chest, I roll it around, and I get it in the fight. Now, can I bring it up and then rotate it around against the stomach or against the appendix or against the groin? Absolutely, you can definitely do that. It's as simple as just clearing the garment. You rotate the gun as you draw it in your hand. We want to minimize movement as much as possible, one gross movement at a time, to minimize the chances of dropping the gun. But if you build up your proficiency, it's the same as using the slide release under stress. If we build up our proficiency with the motion, some people can literally purchase, roll, gun, out. Now, your holster is going to restrict your ability to do some of these motions. With a really strong Kydex holster, I might not be able to roll the gun over until I've completely cleared the waistline, and then I can roll it against my stomach, and then I can get it into the fight. When you begin practicing these motions, it's very important to do it on a dry gun until you get comfortable and confident with it, because especially if you don't spend a lot of time shooting with your support hand, you're going to have some confused motions with your fingers. So it is possible that you may put your finger where you don't want it, like maybe on the trigger. As you're performing one of these motions, you get a finger or two inside the trigger guard, and we definitely don't want that. Now, as with the side, obviously your strong side, drawing my support hand from the appendix is actually a little bit easier. And if you practice both of them, you'll find that from appendix is a little bit faster because the gun's right here. It's not as much motion. If you have a reduced range of motion based on age or sedentary lifestyle or whatever your physical condition may be, you're going to find it easier to access the appendix than you will to access the actual support or the actual strong side gun and actual hip carry. Appendix is going to be a little bit quicker across the board, and there aren't as many concerns with the garment or concerns with the actual range of motion or the actual motion you have to go through to bring the gun into the fight. So in this situation, appendix is a very superior position, I would say, to a hip carry. Now, if you carry closer to the small of the back, some people carry at the 4 o'clock position, some people carry at the 7 o'clock position, or maybe, 7:30 or 3:30 or whatever. The gun is in a more accessible position to your support hand. Like right now, I'm carrying it about the 5 o'clock, right there. So if I want to access the gun with my support hand, it's going to be a lot easier because all I have to do is reach around behind me, clear garment, and then I have a purchase on the gun. I can bring the gun out, get in the fight. Now, the small of the back draw is going to be much easier to access with your support hand, because I can come around the back to where it's going to be at the 5 or the 7, depending on which hand you're using, and access the gun. If you think about it, if I tried to access a small or closer to small of the back carry with my support hand reaching this way, I'm probably not going to be able to get to it. Now, a lot of people have identified disadvantages in carrying that position. We don't want to fall on our gun, and that's absolutely true. But most likely to least likely situation, carry the gun where it's 1, going to be accessible obviously with your primary hand, but 2, it needs to be accessible with your support hand as well. So based on your lifestyle, your body type, your weight, you may determine your best carry position to be accessible with both hands, because it doesn't really help us if our carry position is not accessible with our support hand. Is it unlikely that you'll need to draw the gun with your support hand? I would say it's unlikely, but since it's possible and we're self-defense minded, we need to account for it. Now let's talk about reloading. Now, if I find myself in side lock and I have to reload the gun, obviously my magazines are going to be set up for support hand draw, not primary hand draw. And I only have one hand. I can only trust one hand, I can only use one hand. So getting the magazine out of the gun as a left-handed, or using your left hand, is actually pretty easy. We can use our index finger and just hit the release. There are other ways to do it. That's going to be the fastest and most efficient, and it doesn't really compromise your shooting grip to do it. If your hands are strong enough, depending on gun type, you can use the inside of the finger, but most people are going to have to use the digital tip to hit the release, mags out. Now, how do I get more ammo on the gun if I can only use one hand? Well, you got to put the gun somewhere. One of the most common ones is we just bring it straight down. We put it between the knees, index, roll our magazine, put it in the gun. That's one method. Another method is to simply just tuck it in your waistband, access your ammunition, put your ammunition in the gun. Me personally, I tend to go back and forth depending on what I'm dressed, how I'm wearing, what I'm doing, but I might normally just bring it up like that, tuck it in the front of the waistband. Now I can access my ammunition, roll it over, get it into the gun. Now my gun's ready to go, right? Well, once the magazine's in the gun, how do I close the slide? One of the most popular methods is to rack the gun off of something, off of your belt, or maybe off your pocket, or maybe off the back of your shoe. You can go to a crouching position and rack it off the ground if you have to. There's a lot of different ways to get the gun to chamber that round once you've performed your reload. My personal favorite is actually equal and opposing pressure. So here's my slide lock, as Glock calls it, the slide release. This is one of the Vickers ones, so it's a little bit bigger. If you use Glock, I highly recommend you get a larger slide release, the largest you can find. Aerotech right now has the largest one on the market. As I get the magazine in there, I've tucked the gun in the belt, I've gotten my magazine into it. Now I'm bringing the gun back up. I have a couple of options. We already talked about some of them. Racking the gun off anything using the rear sights as a point of contact, off the belt buckle or what have you. Another method is to simply bring your finger up to sit on that slide release. And if you're strong enough and you have enough dexterity, you can just press down. A second method is to come off and use the digital tip of your finger to hit the slide release. And of course, a third method is to use equal and opposing force. I can bring the gun up, hit it on my thigh as I hit the release. Or I can simply hit it against my belt buckle, my magazine pouch, what have you. I don't necessarily have to rack the gun off of something if I have enough range of motion in my index finger to ride that release. If I have even more range of motion and more strength, I don't even need to hit the gun or anything, I just need to ride it down. But you want it to be consistent. So personally, my advice to everyone until you get really comfortable and really competent with this is just to hit the gun against something and hit the release at the same time. So I'm gonna come up just like that, or I can come in just like that. Can you reload without looking at the gun? Yes, you can. You absolutely can, except when you can't. There are some instructors out there, I know Rob Pincus teaches this, he teaches a non-visual reload where you bring the gun all the way in. My problem with that is that our biggest source of input when something is wrong, sensory-wise, is our eyes. So if I bring the gun in, for whatever reason, and I have an atypical malfunction, maybe when I'm reloading the gun, I have a round off mag, or I'm missing, or something else is going like that, and it hits, and it's just not going into the gun. No matter what I do, the magazine isn't going into the gun, it's not seating correctly. What am I most likely going to do just based on nature? I'm going to look. So I want to keep the gun in a position during a reload, hopefully, to where I can see the gun when I reload. In this technique, using your support hand shooting only techniques, there aren't a lot of places you can reload the gun where you can actually see it. Make sense? Makes sense to me, because if I have to reload here, if I have to reload here, if I have to reload with the gun in the holster, if I'm reloading between my knees, if there's a problem, I have to look down. Risk versus reward. If I can see where the magazine needs to go, I'm going to reload the gun faster. Is it advantageous to reload the gun without looking at it? It is. But is it going to work every time? No. We want consistency, and under stress, we don't know how a reload's going to work. It is physiologically impossible to overcome 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 5,000 years of evolution where our biggest source of sensory input is our eyes. So if your methodology includes trying to reprogram science and reprogram nature, you're going to need a little bit more of actual factual proof of the technique being used in real life before I'm willing to buy into it. Now, what about you guys out there like myself who are primarily left-hand dominant? Well, you kind of hit the jackpot if you have to use your support hand. So as a left-handed shooter, if I have to use my right hand, the only thing functionally different are the controls on the gun, especially if I'm using a Glock. But it's cool because most guns are designed for right-handed shooters. So the magazine release is where my thumb's at and the slide release is where my thumb's at. So my life is actually pretty easy. Now, I'm all about being able to rack the gun off of other objects, but even if you've got a duty belt or you're using the edge of a piece of cover, using something like that, depending on the sights you use, there is a possibility that the rack won't work. So if I can default to the slide release and I'm comfortable, competent, and consistent, that's what I'm going to go with. So if I'm injured, my left hand is injured, my left arm is injured, and I have to switch to the right hand, it's very easy for me to consistently use that slide release. I'm not necessarily aiming for the release so much as I'm just putting a lot of caveman pressure on the slide of the gun and going straight down. My target isn't here, but if you look at where my thumb at, that's where it's naturally going to be on the side of the gun. I'm not going to do an actual point indexing of the release so much as I'm just going to come in and rake. With the magazine release, I can hit it with my thumb all day long. That's the only functional difference from left hand to right hand or right hand to left hand is the actual controls on the gun. The draw mechanics are going to remain the same depending on which hand you're drawing with. If I carry on the left and I got to draw with my right, there's not going to be any functional differences. Now, just like one hand only shooting, support hand only shooting, support hand only mechanics is going to be uncomfortable. You're not going to want to do it and be honest with yourself about it because it's something you've never done before. or something you don't practice enough to where you're already proficient with it. We get in our comfort zone as shooters. We like having two hands on the gun at all times. When we start removing one hand from the gun, our shooting tends to go to crap. So we try, or we may subconsciously stay away from those shooting techniques because we're not as good at them. But you know as well as I do, we all start as a beginner. In order to build up that skill and the proficiency, we have to practice, and we have to do correct practice using the correct techniques. Otherwise, our shooting's never really going to improve. So if you're being honest with yourself, if your one-hand shooting, and especially if your support hand only shooting is bad, the only way to fix it is to actually get out and do these techniques. Now I know most of you are going to use indoor ranges, so you are going to be kind of restricted. Some indoor ranges have started to kind of relax a little bit, and if you can demonstrate that you're capable, they'll let you draw from the holster. But if you start doing support hand only draws on an indoor range, that's an issue. So that part of the practice is probably going to be relegated to your garage, your bedroom, your basement, wherever you practice your dry fire stuff at. But when you go to the range, spend some time working on the actual mechanics of shooting with your support hand only. I can't give you any tricks or techniques to make it easier than what I've already given you for the actual operation of the controls on the gun. Shooting fundamentals remain the same. Sight picture, sight alignment, grip, trigger squeeze, none of that changes. It's just with a hand that you're used to using as a support hand. We want to work to ambidextrous proficiency with both hands on the handgun as well as the rifle. Something you need to get out and practice as much as you can. Even if you don't get a lot of rounds behind this, you can still practice the actual methodology and the methods of the draws, the reloads, and things like that in your own time without firing a single round or wasting any money. I'm Aaron Cow with Sage Dynamics. Train accordingly.
Hey, if you got your continuous frame, you could keep rolling.
That's fine. Just leave it rolling. Hey everybody!